And I'm wondering what your thoughts is on this in particular. Why are we so reluctant to take people, particularly women, to the mat on these sorts of issues? Because, man, I remember when you did a talk on abortion. That was great, right? And by the way, it was to me it made sense, like the brilliant political move, right? What do? You have something that you want from me, so give me something that I want. I thought that was called politics. Now, just to remind people, the abortion debate, right? The Clarence Thomas thing. Roe v. Wade gets overturned, gets sent back to the states. People lose their minds, and you start to see Democrats or people on the left trying to galvanize uh, uh, minority groups into supporting them. And me and Irami and possibly three other black dudes pushed back on that, and might have maybe Thomas in Scotland, but we pushed back on that and said, well, you have something that I want. Why not give me what I want, and then we'll address your issue of abortion, right? And again, I thought this was politics, but I quickly learned from my friends and extended family that that was not the right way to view things. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Raisin Bread. And oh my God, you guys, I am so excited for this one. Professor Irami Osei Frimpong joining us today of the Funky Academic, new episodes Mondays and Thursdays. Irami, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. This should be a hoot.
This should be a hoot. Irami, why do you hate white women? And why do you hate women in general?
Why do I hate women? So I'm not a huge fan of womanhood. I don't hate women. They didn't do anything to just being born with like certain, the sex is supposed to be how your biological determination is how you're born. And then gender is how that's taken up in society. The problem is the way womanhood has been taken up in society is anti-black, right? In the same way that, yeah, well, it's easy to say that the way manhood is taken, when I say that the way manhood is taken up in society is anti-black, it's not that hard to actually get your head around, because like the white guy protects and provides, and who you protecting from? You're protecting from rodents, you're protecting from strangers, and you're protecting right? You're protecting from Native Americans, you're protecting from wild animals, and you're protecting from that's like, when you talk about protecting and providing, always ask, who are you protecting from? What are your challenges? And then when providing, how are you providing? Well, you're not killing animals out there in the wild. They're talking about exploitation. So the white guy's attitude, like the white male like idea of masculinity, is tied up in America with the extraction of labor, the asymmetrical extraction of labor from black people, including black men, and protecting like that extraction and that family unit. And the family is a racialized unit, from like the justice claims of black people, right? So when you're talking about masculinities tied with protecting and providing, that is an anti-black notion in America, and it shouldn't be that hard to get to. It shouldn't be that, like when we talk about like 1930s German masculinity, it's tied to like tied to like an anti-Jewish sentiment. It's not that hard to see how like a modern American masculinity is tied to an anti-black sentiment. The thing is, we assume that womanhood isn't similarly blessed. When you look at like the culture of womanhood, and I think Louise Newman wrote a book on white women's rights, and you look at the culture of womanhood, it was always tied to a racialized project, because it's ultimately a family project, and all of these kind of gender ideologies are ultimately family projects, and insofar as they're family project, they're going to be racialized, because it's our family against those people who can't be confused for our family. Right? So it's so you have to look at both gender ideologies as ultimately racial projects. And we're comfortable saying that there's something racialized about masculinity, especially white masculinity, but we're not comfortable saying that there's something racialized about white womanhood, when there's obviously something racialized about white womanhood, insofar as the protection was tied to extracting labor from Was it tied to like policing black masculinity? And like even was it 2 years ago where that woman in New York threatened to call the police and started crying about this black guy who was like just like bothering her
Central
about following
Park
the law. Right. So like the entitlements of womanhood are tied to the ability to control, honestly, black manhood, but also just black family life. And we can get into that a little bit longer. But so I'm not a big fan of womanhood. I don't have any problem with women, but I'm not a fan of womanhood, which is one reason why I'm not a fan of feminism, insofar as it's the illusion that women aren't also perpetrators as women of a particular kind of racialized harm that they have access to as women. No small number, and you can talk to police officers about them if you are in the middle of talking. No small number of police officers will admit to harassing people just because the woman on the phone expects them to harass people. Right? Like reluctant. Like they'll go to a DV call, understand that actually this woman hit this guy first, and still feel called upon to bring the guy into a DV, domestic violence call, and still feel called upon to arrest the guy just because that's their duty, and they can't admit to the woman like you're not allowed to hit him first, and he just hit you back.
We're 5 minutes in, and I can feel the Facebook comments already. Irami gets me in trouble a lot. Because I steal everything. I steal all his ideas constantly, right? And that makes me very unpopular with a certain type of woman. So thanks for that, Irami. By the way, side note, go on.
Yeah, real quick. There's this illusion that women are not in control of any power in society, where just because like guys might be bigger, like in general, in mass, a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger, that's fine. But we're in a modern society where power is institutionalized. It's not about like what you can do one-on-one. It's what you can do with a cell phone. And who could cause more damage with a cell phone? Me or like a crying white lady? Like a 10-year-old girl with a cell phone and me with a cell phone? That's like a David and Goliath story. And I'm not Goliath.
I love that.
Like white girl tears have killed more black people than the Klan. Actually, white girl tears have triggered the Klan. Right. And that's like, so when we talk about violence, we have to talk about how in a modern society, it's not one-on-one abstracted from institutions. It's contextualized, and who has the power to trigger contextualized violence? That power isn't gendered in an obvious way, and it's not racialized in an obvious way. And if you think that black men have power over white women, like in an institutional environment, like I don't know what kind of institutions you're a part of, because like you're not a part of the criminal justice system, because like if you look at numbers, like they are not in jail like we are. You're not like they don't like okay, so if black men are patriarchs, we don't live as long as women. We don't morbidity and mortality, how our homelessness rates, job like labor force participation is lower. Like we would be the most
We're an unusual subjugator. We're unusual subjugators. We're outliers, right? We don't know how to do it. We don't know how to subjugate.
We're bad patriarchs. We are the worst patriarchs in the history of like we are so bad at wielding power that we lose at all competitions that depend on wielding power.
Who would have thunk? Yeah. No, and I think there's lots of men of color who could. I mean, it doesn't necessarily even have to be within the context of the prison system, but also just talk to any up and coming man of color in any industry, and try to get a few drinks in him, and see if he'll fess up. Who gives him the most problems? There seems to be an unusual pattern there.
It's not necessarily white guys. It's all I'm saying is it's also white women who don't do it in the same way as white guys. Right. So this idea that like just because white women aren't as strong as white guys and they're not the cops who are shooting you, that they're not like also the problem, when we don't look at like, well, they're the person who called 911 for the cop to come shoot me.
But Irami, I didn't do anything. I just called the cops. They're the ones who decided to shoot Shoot the
It's a
man.
it's
I
a
didn't.
it's a it's a kind of power that we're just not sophisticated in seeing, and white women don't want to see because they don't want to give it up. It's nice. They don't want to give it up. It's a nice being able to call the authorities on the alien.
Well, it was nice being on YouTube. I think that's. I think we're done. I think we've got. No, I'm just kidding. No. I think we got it. No. So, by the way, I used to be a comic. So if I, my humor is a bit dry. So if it feels like I'm being whimsy, it is because of that. My father was a finance professor, so I found any opportunity to inject mirth to his dismay. So yeah, he was, he'll go on about cornoduopoly quantities, and I'll say, oh well, I noticed something farted, father, and the conversations, it's been moved. So but no, I like what we're going. There's as usual, right? There's so much that you've put in. I want to hone in on this dynamic, this I protect, you obey. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, the way the whites do family. And
Yeah. What does that mean?
The way the whites do family, where like men protect and provide and you obey, and that seems to work for an authoritarian regime. Like there is like documented evidence. You can go to page 21 of Tommy Curry's The Man Not. I'll give the people citations.
Yeah.
When you do race stuff and you do philosophy, you always have to have citations just in your head, right? So Tommy Curry wrote The Man Not. So just go and look at page 21. He'll lay out the argument and the studies and the footnotes about how black men are just more egalitarian because they have a notion of masculinity that's historically evolved, that's not trying to mimic white masculinity. It's a different form of being a man because we were always in a different in the U.S. We were always in a different economic and social position. So it's more egalitarian, and like all of these, the white guy.
But Bell Hooks told me different, Irami. Bell Hooks told me.
Bell Hooks is funny because I saw the interview with her and Gloria Steinem. Well, Bell Hooks is like, I will never be with a man who doesn't have money. And I'm like, well, this is why, one, you're alone and you died alone, and two, what do you need a black man's money for? Because you're already rich. And three, like, you're the problem. Like, you're the problem. Why are you looking at a black like why? What do you need a black man's money for? You're rich, and like you're the problem. Black men aren't trying to like that. Like that's a you thing. That's you kind of aping white womanhood, and that's why you're alone, and that's why a lot of you didn't have kids. So she was like, I would never be with a black man with money, or a man without money. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. And that is why, like, you, in a lot of ways, you lost at life. You got very rich, but, I don't know. So we were talking about...
I protect, you obey.
I protect, you obey, as the way the whites do family. And sure, that works for a lot of whites, because white women don't want the responsibility of being accountable for decisions. And when you can just say, well, I just did what he told you to. White women don't even drive, it turns out. I didn't know this because like even when I'm in my mom,
I started dating white women. Yeah,
I didn't know.
Go on.
I didn't know that. Like they don't have to take responsibility for anything.
I didn't. It's funny that you say that, because I didn't find that out, that was a thing, because I remember the first time I dated an American woman. It's very different in Europe. Very different in Europe. But in the States, right, my experience was the same as Irami's, in that when I was dating a young, lovely lady, she offered for me to drive her car, and I was confused because I thought to myself, this is not my car, right? Which some might say is a compelling argument. And right.
Why would I drive your car?
Why would I drive your car? She had like a fancy car too. I was like, I'm not gonna be responsible for this. Like, no, you drive your car. But I found out that that's not how the game is played, apparently, and that's interesting to me. I had no idea.
Yeah. So among the whites, the men drive, and the women, like, because I don't know, that's just how they do it. And other patriarchal societies apparently so too, but like not among black people. Because like that doesn't make any sense. Like if you're too stupid to drive a car, that's going to be a problem without dating. Like, are you like if you were injured or something, it would make sense. But just the idea that like I don't trust you to drive a car then like I don't want you to raise my kids or like go to dinner with me or anything else. So like I don't like the idea that somehow women are not adequate to drive cars, or like
Strange.
men need to drive. And then what'll happen apparently, and I was actually in a car amongst the family that does this, where the guy drives, the women will give bad directions and then blame the guy for taking the bad direction. So like it's giving you a license to like just be wholly irresponsible in a way that like I don't understand. And so we infantilize white women.
You've suggested an interesting bi-directional relationship, right? Where men don't have to. There's a relationship where women or white women don't necessarily have to take responsibility for their actions, and in some ways, there's a way men don't have to take responsibility for their actions because they can say, "Well, my wife just told me," right? And we can, you know. There's I think there's, maybe I'm wrong, I think there are some instances where we'll accept that as an answer for a mistake. I think from men.
Yeah, well, I don't want to tick off the missus because it's my responsibility to protect her feelings. Like it's weird. Like there's a weird. The whites are weird, but their weirdness would be fine if it were like sequestered to them. But then it ends up with like black people getting shot and missing jobs, and like it's and like getting squeezed out of property. So it's really on the way the whites do family actually screws up everybody else's like ability to live life in a way that, including black families, right? And this is what
I was going to ask you real quick. Look, what do you think of this, Kevin? Because like the thing that's hot right now that everybody does, everyone wants to talk about relationships. People ask me to talk about relationships. I'm like, I'm not even married. I don't understand why you would want to hear anything from me about that, right? But there is this. There is an interesting parallel, I think, in the Kevin Samuels, Kevin Samuels-esque discourse, if you will, where people talk in the same terms, right? The Bell Hooks interview you mentioned, where she says, "I'm not going to marry a rich man." Immediately,
I'm not going to marry a man without money.
I'm not going to marry a man without money. Okay, what does that mean? Because that to me sounds like the Kevin Samuels narrative, right? He's got to make a certain amount of money before I even consider him, which is interesting.
Yeah. So Kevin Samuels is weird because on some ways he was, so in general he was just kind of he was a high class lightweight, which is good for people who need like an entry level into issues. He was, but like he made the
backhand on that one, Irami. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, he made his money telling black women who expected to like land rich guys that like, why would a rich guy be interested in you? Right. And like that's how he made his money, and which is actually really kind of responsible because not a lot of black men make a ton of money, and if you want to be happy, you might not necessarily want to be with like a guy who's a top 10% earner because they might not be the nicest guy. You want to look, if you want a top 10% earner, they're going to treat you like Crowder treated his wife. Steven Crowder going through a much publicized divorce.
Real quick, the segue on that one. Go on. Go on. Sorry. Well done.
Steven Crowder is a very wealthy guy who made his money telling, the blogosphere or whatever, the YouTube verse, that like men should behave certain ways and women should behave certain ways. And Christianity says that masculinity is this and femininity is that. And people who go against that are ungodly.
Just real quick, if you don't know who Steven Crowder is, well, welcome back from the coma that you've obviously taken on YouTube. He's one of the largest channels on YouTube. He's a conservative commentator who has, I don't know if he has any takes that I agree with, but he has a massive audience. So that's the best way I can describe him. Conservative, think Daily Wire, think that sphere. So
yeah. So and he's now his wife divorced him for apparently being
a jerk,
emotionally abusive. Yeah, would you believe? Would you believe a guy who's made an entire income, buys you a house, buys you a vacation, has supported your entire like livelihood for the last decade by being a jerk, apparently louder than most because his show is called Louder with Crowder. So, like, not
Right.
only did he do all of this by being a jerk, he did it by being loud. Would you believe that when he comes home, he expects you to, like, obey him and will yell at you for it? Would you believe that? Apparently, it shocked his white wife.
Yeah.
Apparently,
Yeah.
it shocked him so much that, like, she cried abuse and now is going to take him for, like, his estate because he was emotionally abusive. And I think that's kind of like these people who kind of throw themselves in front of a car and then sue for, like, it's a kind of insurance fraud. Like, you're marrying Steven Crowder and then are surprised when he expects you to uphold certain gender ideologies within gender, like scripts within the marriage. I don't understand. That's like marrying Donald Trump and then divorcing him because he's bad at sex. I don't like. Maybe.
I mean, go on. Yeah, no. The thing with the Steven Crowder thing is that I am much of the mindset like you. I'm taking an unpopular stance on that as well, which is man, this is a rough one because there's very few people you can feel empathetic to. Maybe the kids. I mean, I watched the Steven Crowder video. I watched the Steven Crowder video recently where he, announced he was going to, release all these legal documents demonstrating I don't know what. But in the video, he says that, the children are not to blame for any of this. And I thought, oh, good, because this entire time I thought it was the children's fault. So thank you for the clarification. Right. So it's interesting. What I thought was interesting about that, I don't know if you've watched that videotape or not, probably not. You're concerned with things like truth. But here in the lower realms, where we eat that up. And I saw the full clip, and I don't know if you knew this, but there's actually about 1:30 cut out. There's lots of jumps. There's lots of edits. And it adds up to about 1:30 of missing footage. And you can tell because of the security camera keeps, logs the minutes, which is really interesting to me. Right. And then when you compound that with the fact that, his former wife, his wife, whatever you would call her, presented that footage to a journalist and Candace Owens. Things are less. I mean, I don't know, man.
No,
it's a little murky.
These are two horrible people who got together and, like, she started, like, terrorists. like they're two horrible people, and I feel like he's explicitly horrible. Like, he's horrible out loud and louder for pay,
right?
And she's just horrible in a different way. And I feel bad because they shouldn't procreate, but now they have kids, and that's just kind of an unfortunate thing. So I have complete faith that she's the kind of woman who marries that guy. And then it turns out that the kind of woman who marries that guy is, like, not great. Not great, right? It's like people are always surprised when criminals turn on each other, but, like, they're criminals. Like, they would like, there's not going to be an honor.
There's no honor amongst thieves. Yeah,
no, they're like, I don't like, you're a thief. Like, she's the kind of guy. She's the kind of, like, mercenary who would marry.
She is a mercenary.
A guy who would, like, make his, like, sustain her life doing that kind of awful thing. And then she used them to get pregnant with kids, and now she's going to take the kids and his assets, and, like, that'll be that. And like, there's an entire economy around that. And I don't participate in that kind. So people, don't marry Steven Crowder, right? don't marry Steven Crowder, and this isn't a problem, which would be, like, obvious if I'm talking to my daughter. But somehow we're supposed to be sympathetic and have her not take any responsibility for marrying Steven Crowder. I mean, that's like the original sin. Like, why do you marry that guy? Maybe if, like,
maybe she didn't know. Maybe this whole time she didn't know. Maybe this whole time she was unaware that he was making, a bunch of money, had, 5 million YouTube subscribers, $50 million deal in the works with the Daily Wire. Maybe she was just completely unaware of all those things, Irami. So I think that's a possibility.
That's the only thing that legitimizes her not being a crook. So either she's stupid,
Right.
or she's a
In a
mercenary.
devastating way. Right.
In a
There's not good options. Yeah, there's no good option. That's the thing. I mean, I heard your talk on this, and I remember I thought to myself, Jesus, from the perspective of the kids, like imagine but they'll be fine, right? Because they have enough money to eat,
afford the therapy, and I don't know.
yeah, the tons of therapy, and I'm sure one of them will have a drug addiction, but again, they'll be fine. But but the thing is, sorry, yeah, but the thing that's crazy about it to me, I think that you mentioned in one of your talks was the fact that we don't really discuss that sort of predatory behavior. And what's interesting to me, and this I encounter this everywhere, me, and I'm wondering what your thoughts is on this in particular. Why are we so reluctant to take people, particularly women, to the mat on these sorts of issues? Because, man, I remember when you did a talk on abortion. That was great, right? And by the way, it was to me, it made sense. Like the brilliant political move, right? What do? You have something that you want from me, so give me something that I want. I thought that was called politics. Now, just to remind people, the abortion debate, right? The Clarence Thomas thing. Clarence Thomas, I think, is the deciding vote. Is he the dissident? I don't remember who wrote the opinion, but Roe v. Wade gets overturned, gets sent back to the states. People lose their minds, and you start to see Democrats or people on the left trying to galvanize minority groups into supporting them. And me and Irami and possibly 3 other black dudes push back on that, and might have maybe Thomas in Scotland. But we pushed back on that and said, well, you have something that I want. Why not give me what I want, and then we'll address your issue of abortion, right? And again, I thought this was politics, but I quickly learned from my friends and extended family that was not the right way to view things. So I'm wondering where that comes from. I'm curious.
It's curious that we should drop everything right. to keep abortion on demand. And I believe, I don't want to legislate against women's ability to choose medical procedures on their body.
You're a pretty left guy. That's why I'm always surprised by the hate you get. I'm like, he's on your side. What are you doing?
Yeah, I have no problem saying I would be a pro-choice legislator. I would sign any pro-choice. I have no problem with that. I expect you to also be pro reparations. All right, cool.
Yeah.
I'll do this thing. I'll do this thing. And you make sure black people get commercial land and some sort of some assets and their fair stake in America. Cool. We could all agree on that. But this idea that you think that your issues should leapfrog racial justice is a little bit unbecoming. The assumption that you get to be lukewarm on reparations, but I should be in the streets, knocking on white neighbors' doors, making sure that they vote, risking my life, literally making sure that they vote. I should be in the hood.
That's true.
I should be in the hood, making sure people who have been degraded for generations drag themselves out of whatever situation they're in to make sure that they vote just so that you can get an abortion. But you shouldn't be bothered to mention reparations at your white lady meeting is ridiculous.
And what's fascinating about that, I think, is often the counter argument you'll hear is, well, this affects black women disproportionately, and it's well, I wonder why that. No one asks why. Why could that? I mean, let's assume the premise true, right?
Right.
What?
Right. So black women, black women can't afford, don't have the stability to afford to raise the kids they get pregnant with, and so that's why they have abortions. It's not like black women don't want kids or are more anti-kids than white women. They look at their life options and understand and do the calculus, saying it takes this amount of resources and this kind of social support to raise a functional kid. I don't have that, so I'm going to get an abortion, right? And what I'm saying is maybe we should put a little bit more energy into securing black women the resources, the assets, and the social support, including a black guy with a good job, so that they can raise their kids, as opposed to just like saying that abortion justice is the same thing as racial justice, right? So it disproportionately affects black women because we've just put black women in a vulnerable state. So I'd like to lift black women out of that vulnerable state and then have them be able to make a decision, because what you're talking about is black women are disproportionately coerced by their poor circumstances into having abortion. And so we should allow black women to exercise their ability in this system of coercion. And I'm just saying that we should take away the economic coercion that black women are subject to, so that they can actually have a meaningful choice and not just be moving under coercive circumstances.
But Irami, anyone can prove anything with reason and identifying a common denominator. I want to shift gears here real quick. You mentioned reparations, which I thought was really interesting. Over the weekend, I was retweeted by someone I did not expect. The Boondocks is real. Ann Coulter retweeted retweeted a tweet. I had posted a video of her arguing for Black Americans and arguing, essentially making the reparations argument, which I thought was really interesting and something that people didn't expect. And subsequently, people lost their minds. I'm curious because you're a little bit familiar, but with sort of where I kind of come from. I have a partner, a former partner, who is from Europe, who seems to be very confused. And every time I try to explain, the reparations question to her, she still doesn't understand it. And her grandfather was I think great grandfather was literally a Nazi. So it's whenever every time I talk to Andrea about this, she's like, "Baby, why don't they want to pay?" I never had an answer. It was utterly. It's so interesting wandering Europe and getting asked by Europeans this question: why don't the Americans want to pay? So I'm curious, where can we build from there? I know you probably have a lot on this.
Well, we need to actually think about the degradation. All right, so the stolen labor. That's the stolen labor. Good. Extracted labor. Fine. Extracted property gains. Extracted property. Like anytime white, they call it gentrification, but pretty much black people, you rent here. Anytime white people want whatever plot of land you're on, we're gonna get it. Either we're gonna raise your rent, you're gonna go, or it's you're renting in America.
There goes the neighborhood. Yeah.
So the black life in America, and even they call it the Great Migration. We're really Southerners were refugees moving out of the South into California. They were run out because either they dealt with the Klan or they left. So they call it a migration, but it's not like it's a naturally occurring experience. They were run out. Right. So, and all the opportunities were outside, or too many of the opportunities were outside. So they left.
Well, let me help you hone in, because I know that I kind of gave you a huge space to play. I'm kind of interested in why there is this. I mean, is it resource guarding? It feels like when I talk to my German girlfriend or my German ex, she gets it. She's just like, you should pay. We paid for our nonsense. Yeah. I'm literally she's had they just finished paying things off a couple years ago. She had to pay into it, right? She wasn't in World War II, to my knowledge. So what is the difference between where is that difference culturally between the Germans and, say, the Americans when it comes to matters such as this?
Well, they understand that Hitler was bad in a way that we don't understand that Andrew Jackson was bad, when they're really the same dude. Andrew Jackson's the worst, and we put him on.
Germans will tell you that. Germans will tell you that. They're just like, it's very odd that you have Andrew Jackson statues. Yeah, they lose their minds. They don't get it either, which is bizarre.
He was the leader of the American genocide. Let's wipe away the Indians, the Native Americans, and let's keep the blacks enslaved. That was his whole thing, to make this country. He brought forth he executed the final solution in the United States. Except since they needed black labor, they didn't just kill all the blacks. They couldn't just do that because they needed us to pick stuff, right? So but like they killed the Native Americans after he just like manifest destiny, the genocide, like they just wanted to wipe them out, right? So like there isn't a difference between Andrew Jackson and Adolf Hitler, and we're comfortable with Andrew Jackson, but we scorn Adolf Hitler when they're really the same dude, and which means Hitler's not that bad, and Andrew Jackson should not be on money.
But you're gonna get me, Kanye. This is gonna be Kanye. Look, I don't know this man. This has been great. This has been great. No, it's. I mean,
they're the same dude.
I mean, and that I think some famous historian earned a Pulitzer just this year for for a biography he did. I don't recall the name. So I've we still honor these people. I kind of enjoyed Ye's trolling a little bit. I'm not sure if he's familiar with the history of Andrew Jackson. I don't know if people remember, but Kanye went crazy as Ye does. I don't want to get into that. There's many reasons for that. I think, but I did find it a little bit amusing when he said, "Well, from a political standpoint." And by the way, that position wasn't that crazy 20 years ago. I remember people making that argument and saying, "Well, he did, do X, Y, or Z." So,
look, I mean, they build roads and schools argument that we use in Afghanistan. Well, we might have done all of this bad, but we'll build you roads and schools. And Winston Churchill over in India led the policies of British colonialism led the famines, like talking about 100,000 dead, possibly millions dead, and that's tied to British colonialism and the policies of Churchill directly. And the British will say, well, we built roads and schools and trains too. And so that's the Jackson argument. We like Andrew Jackson because he built a nation, even though he did it by committing a genocide or encouraging a genocide for Native Americans, and then encouraging slavery for the Black Americans who they wanted as slaves. So, and that was Ye's argument for Hitler. Well, he was, trying to secure roads and schools for the German people, trying to make a German nation. So it's the same kind of argument, and you just can't make a distinction. We're very comfortable hating Hitler and loving Andrew Jackson, and that is a huge problem, and a problem for the American way of life, because you get to why we're so hesitant about reparations is that the entire Southern way of life is not built on, cannot stand racial equality in terms of property, disbursements, in terms of real shared political power and economic power. It cannot stand racial justice. There are too many Black people here who have had too little for too long, and we're just going. I live in a town that's a third Black, but in Athens, Georgia. If you want to know how much commercial property, commercial property Black people own,
probably 0 or 1%, something.
There's yeah, and it's a store, it's a block, but they only own it because white people don't want it yet. Yeah, right. In terms of commercial, home ownership is low, but in terms of commercial property, and we live in a market society, so if you don't own commercial property, that means people don't actually own anything. Yeah. We live in a commercial society, and you don't own any commercial property. So, we would have to redistribute all of those commercial assets. That would fundamentally change, or give Black people control of all of those commercial. That would fundamentally change people's ideology about what their grandkids are going to inherit. And
you don't want to touch that. That is I'm
going to take your grandkids' inheritance and give it to the area. And that's wow. This family, this plot, this contract that's been in your family for 3 generations, and give it to the people your granddaddy used to lynch to secure this contract. Right.
That's tough. And this is only exacerbated by the current sort of economic crises, right? Amongst young people, most wealth, I think most people around my age I'm a first-gen immigrant, so whatever. But most people, around my age, they had help. Their first, for all the first down payments. I'm part of a very exclusive club that had to figure things out on their own. But most of my friends, they were like, "Oh, my grandparents gave $30,000," and I was like, "Oh, that's nice." That was lovely. So it's interesting to me, that exacerbation, that tension, and that could explain, I think, some of, well, there's a lot to go in there. I'm sorry. Go on. I interrupted you.
Well, inheritance is a whole thing. And white
Yeah.
inheritance is real money. Old white money is a lot of money. And like it could
So much
dwarf.
money.
It's so much money. And like you're expecting them to jeopardize their inheritance, which is pretty much the only money they have because the Zoomer whites
Right.
might not be doing that well. Like they're not buying houses paid, they're not paying
At
cash
all.
for houses.
Yeah.
So they're trying to you're expecting them to jeopardize the inheritance they get from Mima and Papa for the sake of racial justice. And it turns out that even the liberal ones and the left ones don't want to do it.
I'm not excited.
Or they'll like get
Not
right up
excited.
to the talk, but then when it comes to jeopardizing the inheritance, they're not going to do it. Right? And
And you know who else does? Go
we
on.
need to be
No,
honest
sorry.
about what that means.
Yeah,
No, we just need to be
We need
honest.
to be honest.
We
Yeah.
need to be honest about what family money means, and white people don't, and why black people don't have it. Not only family money, but like just families.
Yeah.
And I didn't get this till I was reading a book on Jim Crow. And like in every chapter of this book, there was like, well, my kids had to leave school to go work on the farm. My daddy had to leave to go get money on some job. Like,
Yeah.
all like the black family is a disaster because of like the pressures of white supremacy. And we don't talk about what the American government did to the black family. First of all, up until the 40s, 75% of the Southern black labor force were either domestic workers, the women, or sharecroppers or farm workers, right? So like that's already kind of a dubious economy. But then you realize that a good number of those domestic workers were raped, right? You were in white households. Like any light-skinned black person you see in America is a product like of a certain age is a product of rape. We don't talk about it that way, but it is. So like black people could not actually secure their families. And if your job as a man in general was to provide and protect, you like there was no protection. So you weren't a man. So black masculinity is a different kind of masculinity because like there was like look, 75% of the workforce was domestic workers and sharecroppers, and a lot of women worked in white households, and a lot of the women in those white households were assaulted, and that was just part of the political economy, and that is why there's any yella and high yella in the Black South, and then, like it's all rape, and it's all normalized. And so like the black family has been like under siege, and that was just in Jim Crow, like from slavery and Jim Crow.
Yeah.
And then you move on to how that changes a little bit later with the liberalization of divorce laws and how that attacks the black family. So you get a liberalization of divorce laws in the 60s and 70s, which I'm a fan. I think divorce should be like abortion, like legal, safe, and rare. It's like it's just not something we should be like celebrating, but I don't want to keep people in marriages, but like I'm not pro divorce, just like I'm not pro abortion. Like I just think it should be rare, and we like it's always a bad thing, but like it might be a necessary bad thing, and it always kind of sucks for the kids. In abortion, the kid dies. In the divorce, the kid loses like a parent. So and so I do it for the kids.
I wanted to kind of hone in a little bit because I used to live in Chicago, and I met a young woman there, and I talked to her grandmother. I think this was about 10 years ago, and I remember being sort of shocked hearing her sort of recount her work experience in the South. And she recalled to me that she was an old woman. She must have been 90. Good God, I don't even remember. I don't even know. Right. And she recounted how she was paid in chicken feet, and I had no idea. I had no idea that was a thing, that you were allowed to do that. And it's interesting to me because I'm again first generation immigrant. I wasn't aware of this history. No one teaches you that.
No one teaches you that.
And
so
it's
like I had to read this book.
Go on. Go on.
No, well, I had to read this book on Jim Crow to actually get through that. Like, oh, all of these things kind of degraded the black family, and it was actually pretty resilient for a while. But like, the stories of like, well, we had to quit school. You say black people don't care about education, but then like you talk to some black grandfather, they'll say like, well, I had to quit school to go work at the farm to support the family at an early age, and like I and all of my brothers had to do that, right? And then you look at just the vulnerability of like to the law, and it's hard to keep a job when you're in and out of jail, and then it's just hard to keep a job when like they'd rather not have you there anyway. And so and how all of that played into the inability for black families to actually stay stable. And then it gets liberalized. And for your audience, I'm going to give you a highbrow concept, the highbrow people. All right, so one of the innovations of liberalism and neoliberalism is they get you to do things to yourself. They get you to choose to do things that before 100 years ago, people would effectively force you to do. Right? So like, and I say that like, this is why a lot of black men are a little bit, I don't want to say transphobic, but just a little bit wary of black men transitioning, exactly, because 100 years ago, part of the lynching process was they cut off your nuts. They castrated you because black manhood was a threat to the white racial order, right? So part of lynching was like, we'll kill you and we'll castrate you, and some of them will pickle your nuts and put them in the grocery store. Castration was a ritual part of lynching. And I'm always a little bit curious. I'm always a little bit wary when like, now there's a movement to push black boys to willingly cut off their own nuts, right? So like that's like, I'm always like, so the innovation of liberalism and how it works in sort of kind of a capitalist economy, but on a racialized order, is that they'll get people to voluntarily do things that sustain the order. So the innovation with no-fault divorce and divorce in the black community was that we would put pressure on your family and threaten your family with external violence and break up your family that way right up until the 70s. Now we'll just incentivize you to screw up your own family.
Yeah,
exactly. Like my mom will admit now that she divorced my dad because like, that was just in the air. If you're not happy with your black husband in the 80s, you just divorce him. And that was just what, and black men, and the idea is that white women did it because, well, we need to prove to ourselves.
Journalism degree from Wesleyan. Or Wesleyan.
Yeah, we need to prove to ourselves that we don't need a man in order to we can be independent. We don't need a man to live our lives. And black women looked at that and said like, well, we didn't need this man anyway. Like he was never, because black women have always worked and like have always like, contributed. So like they didn't even need the push that white women, they're like, I don't know if I can do it on my own because I need his check. Black women looked at that like, well, I never needed his check. So like, I don't have to share power with anybody. And so like, I can just do it anyway. And so like that ran through. So it got black people, and I say black women, and people are going to be like, you're a misogynist. Well,
they're going to lose their minds. Yeah, they're going to lose their minds.
Women initiate some 60 to 80% of the divorce, depending on which studies you look at. And among college-educated women, it goes from like 70 to 90%. Like women are the one calling it quits in marriages. And one of the indicators on divorce is when like women think they can do better.
and the thing is I've tried to discuss this, like I see the same thing as you, and I've tried to discuss this sort of willing serfdom is how I try to describe it to women of color, and I get so much pushback, even though it's genuine, where it's like it feels really weird that you're still at the office and she goes home, right, to see her kids. That something feels weird about that. I don't know, but maybe I'm crazy. So it's interesting. It's an interesting struggle. I wanted to again sort of shift and hone in on the fact I'm a first generation immigrant.
Right.
I understand.
My dad.
Go on.
Well, my dad came from Ghana. My mom's from South Carolina. My dad's from Ghana. That's why I have the name lovely. I have.
Lovely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
No.
So like, and that was one of the frictions between them because my dad was like kind of very like serious about parenting and all of that, and my
Sure.
mom
Yeah.
didn't quite understand like
Yeah.
that, and it kind of spooked her. And depending on who you talk to and which words you could use, it could look abusive.
Right. Right.
And but
There's the
really, it's
word.
just like a African dad who's very serious about
No.
like
Yeah.
raising kids in America. And it spooked her, so she divorced her. And now looks back and realized that like, well, we both could have used a daddy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
but me and my
and
sister.
and that's something I totally get. My father is, I like to call him the get to the airport early white. He's a Turkish man, but he was raised in Africa. By all accounts, he's very African in the way he approaches things. He grew up in the Sudan,
Yeah.
and yeah, so he's very. The one time I let slip that he was Turkish, he lost. He got very upset. He's a very interesting character, my dad. He's like, no, I'm African. I was like, okay. But I understand that seriousness that you're referring to. My father, and maybe this is something he instilled in me, had a pretty sophisticated understanding. In my family, there's a history of rebels, right? Like my grandfather um, uh, was part of the Ottoman Empire, but he betrayed them. Basically, there's a picture of him at Berkeley, actually. Um, if you're ever wandering the hallways of the history department in Berkeley, and you see some Africans some Africans, and then one lone serious-looking white guy, it's probably my grandpa. And so there's this spirit of rebellion that's kind of passed generationally, I think. And so I was very up to date on a lot of history, African American history, because of how I was raised. And the only reason why I mentioned this is because I was very surprised. Again, one of the tweets I made over the weekend, people used my tweets to bully presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, which I thought was very interesting. I didn't know who this guy was. I think he's interesting because there's lots of immigrants who think like him, and we'd be lying. I think we'd be lying to. There are even African immigrants who think like him.
Yeah.
And we'd be lying to say that those people don't exist, right? And I'm always shocked because when you look into these. By the way, I didn't get a chance to look into Ramaswamy's background, but it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't come from the slums of Mumbai. Yeah, they wouldn't surprise me, right? It's like, are you Brahmin or that question's always the same. Yeah.
No, he's a Brahmin. So there are lots of people who come here. They look at black families and they look at black cultural degradation, and they look at like the fact that any large area with a lot of African American descendants of slaves doesn't have a lot of nice stuff that works. Yeah. And they're just thinking that like, oh, these people are defective. If they just did what we did, they'd be fine. Even the Africans who come here and do what we did. But then they'll say stuff like, well, we came here with nothing. We came, well, Viswami is like the worst kind, because he'll be like, we came here with nothing except graduate degrees. No,
you didn't.
Your family came here with nothing except fellowships and graduate degrees, and we made it. And 5 generations of treating lower caste Indians like garbage, and and look what we did with just like a family and graduate degrees.
Just a bit
and they're talking to people who are like, well, like, they don't have parents, right? So if you come here, and I say this, and this is something we need to take seriously. If you come here with an intact family and nothing else but an intact family,
you win.
Like, you're already like light years ahead of a lot of people in the hood. If you come here with an intact family of people who are committed to no matter what, work together and figure it out together, that's already like light years ahead. That's leaps and bounds ahead of even what I grew up with. Like, I didn't have a dad. Like it's not the money. Like, you come in with an intact. That means your kid knows how to handle a relationship when they're in one because they see it modeled with the family. So that's already like, how long did it? It took me quite a long time to figure out how to deal with a relationship because I didn't see one modeled like at all. So like, if you just come here with an intact family with 2 parents who, like, when one's busy, you can go to the other one for advice, and like, that's already like enormous. That's already like
Yeah.
a $500,000 5K or in
Yeah.
the bank. Like,
Yeah.
so just saying that, well, my family came here with nothing. It's like, well, your family came here as a family. How many of the people you're making fun with, like, don't have, like, you're making fun of? How many people in the hood don't have that? Don't even have that?
And you tweeted a video just before we jumped on with his comments on merit, and it kind of just blew me away how tone deaf he was. I was like, wow, I get it now. Like, go ahead, guys, bully him. It's fine. Because
Yeah.
he's this idea of merit, and this vague dance around, or vague suggestion that merit isn't somehow salient to people of color. Like, it's just like, what are you doing, dude? Like, they would have treated
Yeah,
you
yeah,
very differently, by the way, just 50 years ago. It's not that long ago, Vivek, that you would be
yeah.
under very
Yeah,
similar circumstances. So, yeah.
So
So,
the H-1B visa, if you people don't know, is called the visa we give, smart and up and coming people from across the world to come and be Americans. I suspect it's the visa my dad got because he came here for college. I suspect it's the visa that your dad got because did he come
no,
for the job or did he
political,
come for
no,
graduate?
political asylum. I told you,
Oh,
my family's rebellious.
all right, so like there's the other there's like the refugee visa. There is the like they'll kill me if I stay here visa, which is what your dad got.
Yeah.
And then there's
Yeah.
the H-1B visa where like I'm going to come here and make a lot of money, but since I'll do it as an American, it'll be good for America visa. And
Yeah.
that's the visa we that Vivek's family gets.
Yeah.
And that's the visa of people who come here, teach in schools or like work in the
Work at
engineering
Google.
firms.
Work
and
with me.
work at
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
with you like at Google, and then treat black people like trash because like, come on, I just got here and I'm doing all right, right?
Right.
So my idea is that we need, if we're going to keep that kind of visa, we need a quality of citizen education that includes talking to me, watching this video right here about what has happened to Black Americans, because we don't need to import people to just make the racial justice struggle harder,
worse.
just because they
Yeah.
might be marginally better for the GDP. Like, so if we're going to keep the H-1B visa, we need a culture test that makes sure that we need more, immigrants like Shama Sawant and fewer ones like Bobby Jindal and Vivek Ramaswamy. And so that they have the gratitude for what Black people have done for the nation that allow them to even come here. Because there's a reason why the H-1B program happened in 1965 and not 1935, right? And not 1925, right? Because, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a discussion I often have with my DC, my Southeast Asian friends. Is like, you understand you'd be in the same position, right? Just in like, no one could if you think people struggled with your name now, right? Imagine travel in time 60 years ago and imagine, right? You are I mean, God, what was it? Just 10 years ago, that massacre at that Sikh temple. The guy thought they were Muslim. Like
Yeah.
they can't like, this isn't 50 years. This is just within the last decade, right? And it's just frustrating because, and maybe maybe it's because I am phenotypically Black, right? Like, I think other Black people can tell I'm mixed race. Usually, women can tell I'm mixed race. But for the most part, yeah, I don't know how. But for the most part, right? Like, if I'm being written down on a police report, like, it's not really a guess as to what they're going to check, right? And so there's a familiarity there with that struggle. Now, I can't make claims to certain things like slavery and the legacy behind it. That's a whole different thing that I still have to constantly, teach myself about. But there is an experience there that I am, and I think you can relate to this, that I'm very familiar with, and that allows me, I think, to sympathize and understand, hey, they're not lying. I don't think they're making this up. I think they're on to something. So I'm hoping.
Yeah, no, Black people should have good
on.
Black people should have good families and focus on education. That's fine. But why isn't that the case? Why isn't that the case? Well, it's because they're terrorized and like they don't have the assets or cultural structure and this is part of a design. This is part of a
Yeah.
strategy. This is white women paying Oprah to tell my mom to divorce my dad if she's not happy. And what kind of 40-year-old black woman in the 80s is going to be happy? So I don't understand, and that divorce is the answer. And that children don't need their father, right? And since we don't have an independent institutional, there's this myth of black culture that we have these independent media institutions that produce black culture, but production takes money, and you know what we don't have? Money. So there is no independent black culture. Black music on the radio is on the radio, not because black people picked it ultimately, no, because a record exec who's not black greenlit it somewhere, right? And when Kanye, this is another part where Kanye was right. He was like, you know what? I realized that we don't own the black voice. There's no reason for him to lie, because he's one of the loudest black men in the world, and he's saying that black people don't own the black voice. That means he's been in the rooms where other people who do own the black voice have told him what to say, and he's seen, or told other people what to say, and he's seen black men say it. I have seen a lot of white people tell black people what to say, and then 10 minutes later have seen those black people say it in the black voice, depending on who you talk to. That was the Obama presidency. So, I don't.
It wouldn't be an Irami video if there wasn't a shot. I mean, I'm fine with it. I'm with you, but I just thought it was funny. I was just watching a video with you discussing Obama, but that's a whole other thing. But go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that guy. But
never heard of him. Yeah.
Never heard of him. But what I do want to say is that we don't control the black voice. So Oprah, who was put on by the whites, going into black homes as the black voice, telling people to live their best selves or whatever the thing is, and eating up, and that leading to divorce, that is part of the problem. We don't have an independent immune system, media infrastructure to say that that's actually garbage. Stay with your guy, work it out, because your kids need a father. We didn't have that for the 70s, 80s, and 90s because we don't have there was never the resources to fund an independent, autonomous black voice. The black voice in America has always been the voice that white people allow people to talk to. Who do you think is the biggest funder of HBCUs right now? Historically black colleges.
I don't even want to look. Yeah, I don't want to look.
It's Mackenzie Scott.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
Mackenzie Scott. Who's Mackenzie Scott? It's Jeff Bezos' wife. So if you're an administrator at an HBCU, a historically black college, are you going to program anything? Are you going to say anything that might get on the other side of Mackenzie Scott?
If Dubois makes Mackenzie Scott mad, he's out. Yeah.
He's out, and people don't know. I mean, right? That Du Bois was fired from an HBCU. Yeah. He was fired from Clark Atlanta University for insinuating that some of the donors don't have black freedom in mind. Right. So Du Bois, one of the greatest Americans America has produced, was fired from an HBCU for getting on the other side of a white donor. That's a white female donor, by the way. White female donor, and that story can be reiterated for any mouthy black guy in the Democratic Party.
So many times. I kind of, I think I kind of want to try to move in a way where we can land on something positive. I saw a tweet of yours that I thought was really interesting. I don't know if it was today. This is bad because I just realized I feel like I come off as a stalker because I consume everything. As soon as you put out an essay, I'm like, all right, I'm like, wake up, babe, the new Irami is out. But you put out a tweet where you said, look, there's a universal, I think, freedom that can be found in black. What was the word you used? Yes, correct.
The black struggle.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So this Thursday show is going to be, or the tomorrow show is going to be on the need for a black Haggadah. If you've never been to a Passover Seder, I said everyone should go to a Passover Seder. It is fantastic to see a culture that works. Have you been to a Passover Seder?
Yeah, yeah, I have actually. I've been very lucky.
It's like I've been to a Passover Seder. I was like, oh, this is how a Jewish people keeps themselves a people.
Yeah, yeah,
So like
yeah,
during a
yeah,
Passover Seder, like you pretty much talk about what it means to be a Jew, what it
yeah.
means that other people are trying to get us, and how we're favored by God. Like what it means to be a Jew, what other like what it means that other people are trying to wipe us out,
Nailed it.
and how
Nailed it.
and
Yeah.
and how we're favored, how we're going to ultimately win if we stick to us. And then they build into the ceremony, people questioning that. These four
Yeah.
kids, the wise child,
Yeah.
the recalcitrant child, they build into the ceremony people kind of pushing back against that. And the wicked child is wicked because the wicked child thinks, what does this have to do with me? I'm my own person. And then
Yeah.
the response to that that's built into the ceremony is that you just think you're your own person because you're ignorant of the community that has
Yeah.
secured you and brought you into life. And you are a member of a community. That's what it is to be an individual you. You
Yeah.
are an
Yeah.
individual Jew, right? And like
Yeah.
that's kind
And
of
by the way,
built
there's rules to this
into
community. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
there are rules to this community, and what you are, you're an individual, but you're an individual Jew. And that's what
Right.
that means. And you just think that you're just abstract individual. And like,
Right.
no, you're an individual Jew. And like, in order to be anything, you have to be an individual Jew. And so there are rules in this community. And like the reason why you're wicked is you don't understand yourself as part of a community. And so that's why you're not going to have any meaning in your life unless you embrace the community and embrace your individuality within and because of the community. And that's all
Right.
built in to the Passover Seder.
Yeah.
And so they have an identity that is particular. That's
Yeah.
like we're a particular identity, not to be confused with those other people. Those
Yeah.
other
It's
people are either
indivisible.
trying to kill us,
Yeah.
right, or they're either trying to wipe out our particular identity, but are trying to kill us, or they're just irrelevant to us.
Yeah.
Because we are a particular we. And if you want meaning in your life, understand the particular we-ness that we are, right? And that is a way of sustaining it internal to the culture. So they don't have their identity just by being oppressed.
Right.
They have their identity
Right.
that's been spiritualized. They've spiritualized their identity as like an internal way of being a people, right? So that's why they'll have a unity that black people who will all be treated like garbage because they're black won't have, because that's like an external imposition that hasn't been spiritualized yet, right? So I'm going to talk about this. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
watch, please watch. Please, guys, like, look, if you know me personally, I just watch any one of his videos and you'll just realize I steal from him constantly, all the time. And I've now admitted it in front of him. So no, please watch The Funky Academic. It's the best. I'm sorry. You're and you're going to cover this on Thursday. I
yeah,
hope
tomorrow
I don't.
we need a black Haggadah. We need a black Haggadah, and the black Haggadah won't just be. And I think about this because Alex Haley, when he wrote Roots, said I wanted a myth for my people to live by. Now, whether or not you think Roots succeeds is one thing,
Whatever.
but
Yeah.
the aspiration isn't like the most ridiculous aspiration, because in order to make sense of yourself as a people, you need stories about yourself as a people, as a unified people, and what happened to us as a we. Right. So the 1619 project could be some of that, but you need some sort of like spiritualization of that. And what mediating on the black struggle could be is not a particular identity that just like rejuvenates and resuscitates the black identity. It is the kind of identity that teaches America what it is to be American, right? And this is what, like, when I say that W.B. Boys and Martin Luther King were some of the best Americans America produced, it's because, well, Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the best Americans America produced. And he taught or led a movement, or was like figured in a movement that taught Americans how to be Americans. He wasn't good for black people in particular, or merely good for black people in particular. He taught Americans how to be Americans. It was a universal move forward. in the same way. Yeah. So it was so whereas like the Jewish Haggadah teaches Jews how to be Jews, but keeps them particularized as Jews. The Black Haggadah teaches Black people what it means to be Black, but it also teaches non-Black people what it means to be good universally, like what it means to be beloved and be worthy of being favored universally. So it's it could lead to a universal identity in the way that the Jewish Haggadah will never and can never. It will always be particularized.
That's so good. Oh
I think
man,
so. I think so.
that's so good. Yeah, I don't have words, man. Irami, the funky academic. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. He has no business talking to me. I just tweet. Yeah. I got real lucky on this one. We landed a real big fish. Irami, you're amazing. The funky academic. I'll make sure I include details in the description and at you on YouTube. Shout out to you, Irami, and looking forward to your next talk. Thanks, buddy.
Good. Peace.